So at the end of the day, I was kind of disappointed. I've seen a lot of other YouTubers use it, and it seems to dry within a few minutes and just magically work. Um, I did see something where Midwinter Minis kind of used water to manipulate it, even though the bottle says that it's suspended in solvents, which would seem to indicate that it's not water soluble, because it definitely doesn't smell like it's suspended in water. But it was really weird, and I just really would. Wait. Did I not wait long enough? Hey guys, welcome back to Tabletop Glory. My name is Graham Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about Dirty Downs. Now, Dirty Downs is a product line that is kind of known throughout the film industry. It actually, well, they are everywhere if you really sit and look for their products and you think about all the things and the applications and the ways that they can be used. But the reality is that we're starting to finally get them in the miniature world, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on them through the American distributor, and it's incredible. Now, that having been said, I want to clarify right now. These were purchased by me and my store. I own a hobby store. We sell things online. I purchased 12 bottles, 3 for myself, and I did this because I wanted to test out the product and see how well it does. I've seen a lot of YouTubers Midwinter Minis. I think even Miniac at one point has used it, and I know that Blackmagic Craft uses the Rust one a lot. And if you go and look at their website, there are a lot of really impressive images. Like, I'm talking a seriously large and impressive number of images. And honestly, I just thought, well, there's no way this product works that well. I mean, you look at a lot of other products, whether they're acrylic paint based or powder based or a mixture of something, they never really work unless you've seriously experimented with them. And then you realize that it's almost just as much work as probably the old way that you were doing it. So let's take a look at my first experience with it real quick, and then let's talk about the breakthrough I made with it. So that way you guys can learn from my pitfalls, and when you pick this product up for yourself, you'll be able to skip all the nonsense and actually really enjoy this product. And I think you guys are going to like the end, especially considering I kind of already spoiled it in the thumbnail. So here we are with Dirty Downs, all 3 of them, the Verdigris, the Rust, and the Moss. And I went ahead and used, this is a lid from the Reaper Miniatures cargo container. They have a bunch of different sizes now, but they all have this like little bottom lid that comes off so that you can hide encounters for surprise encounter effects. And I just happen to have a couple extra, so I grabbed one of them. So I put some copper on one side, I put bright silver in the middle, and I put blue on the left. And I wanted to just use this as a way to experiment with this product. And this is mostly just to see how the product interacts with different colors, but mostly also because the Verdigris needs to be on top of a copper color. Now, what's important to keep in mind here is I shook the ever-living mother-crapping duck out of this bottle. In fact, all of these bottles. And then I used my electric paint shaker to shake them on top of what I did. I did not realize that there were still clumps in the bottom. I found that out later, and you can see me here gingerly applying them. I think I'm being rather delicate with my application, considering how with some other products that I have, I just slap them on. I wasn't really sure how this worked, and at this point I'm thinking to myself, this is a really, really dark green for something that looks teal on the bottle. Now, I'll talk about where I went wrong here once we talk about me starting to realize how I messed up. But let's continue forward and check out the application of the Rust. So once again, I'm just kind of slathering it on the way that I did with the previous one. Now, it's important to recognize that I did read the bottles. I've done everything that the instructions claim on the bottles that I have. Now, where I started to go right is when I reached out to a friend of mine who had a different type of bottle from this same company, and he read his instructions to me, and we realized that they were different. And they were very similar, about 90% the same, but when I started to do things the way that his instructions were labeled, I got completely different results that were way closer to the images on the Dirty Downs website, or I should say the American Distributors website. Now with the moss, I wanted to see how it interacted with the other products. I also wanted to see how it looked on top of a darker color, because I presumed that it wouldn't show up as well, which I ended up being kind of right, which is why I also ended up putting it a lot on the bottom edge there. But you'll notice that I kind of don't get a good result, and even after I learned what I was doing wrong, I didn't get a great result. However, I do feel like if you combined Dirty Downs moss with some of the other products that I have for doing a similar effect, you would achieve an absolutely killer look. And we are going to try that very soon down the road. It won't be in this video, as this video is just dedicated for Dirty Downs. But yeah, you can see I'm really struggling to get the effects in this first go around, and then I learned that it turns out you have to water them down. On the bottle, it indicates that the product is suspended in what is essentially an emulsion of solvents, which would seem to indicate to me that it is a product very similar to lacquer paint. And as a result of that, I assumed that it was not water soluble. Every other product I have that's labeled this way is not water soluble. And so when I initially tried to get a similar effect to what was on their website by thinning this stuff out, I used a lacquer-based thinner, and it just destroyed it. In fact, I'm not even showing you that attempt because it was so bad. This one was a lot better. And if I had come back in right now while things were still wet and mushed things around with some water on a brush, it would have looked phenomenal when it dried. But you're gonna see here in just a second that it actually looked pretty bad. Yeah. So you can see how bad it looks without adding water and spreading things around. It's important to recognize that it apparently is water soluble, which means that in theory you have more working time than just how long it takes the product to dry, because it also has to cure. And it's the same thing with our water-based acrylic paints. It dries and then it cures. So you can reactivate it to a certain degree with water after it looks like it's dried if you're willing to scrub a little harder. Now you may not get the desired effect as if you had, started moving around a little bit sooner, but you're not completely screwed if it looks like it's completely dry. You've got a few minutes. So here you can see me desperately attempting to revive stuff as it is in the process of curing. That's why when you see the final result, there's going to be spots that are almost black. This is places where I reactivated multiple products at once, and they mixed and did not mix well. That's why you're also going to see some of the verdigris in the bottom left-hand side, because somehow some of it got from all the way over there to all the way over there. You really want to make sure that each layer is dry before you do a new layer if you're going to be using multiple of the same Dirty Down products on the same piece. I would recommend waiting until it's dry, putting some kind of a lacquer finish on top of it to lock it down, and then doing the next product. Now you can build this up in layers, which I believe is where you're going to get most of your realism from, is layers. However, I want you to keep in mind with the rust that, very similar to Agrellan Earth from Citadel, if you put it on in thick amounts, the rust will crack. And if you look at a lot of the reference images on the Dirty Downs website, or at least again the American Distributors website, you will see that the cracks are there on almost every example, other than ones where they did very thin coats. And there's, to a certain level, a lot of realism there, I feel like. So depending upon how many layers you add on top of that to then have these like really hair-thin line cracks that have this rusty tinge to them, I feel like it would really lend itself well to the illusion of age. Now you can already see the verdigris on the right hand side. Some of that blue's already starting to come through. Now I'm just trying to use a hairdryer to speed this up. Apparently also, if you use a hairdryer to heat up the miniature before you apply the product, it also will start the transformation a lot faster, and it will go farther in its color change before it dries, or before it cures all the way and 100% dries, I should say. So consider heating up the miniature if you want to. With some resin miniatures, your swords may get a little floppy, so you may not want to do that for resin miniatures. And so with all that out of the way, we are moving on to the fun part. So the review is basically over here. If you think the product looks really cool, then go ahead and pick some up for yourself. Just a reminder that as of right now, we are going to be stocking this. It's not in the inventory currently, but it should be very, very soon. And you can pick some up from myself, or you can get it from another source. I'm going to be pricing mine right around the exact same price that you're going to find it on Amazon for anyway. But that having been said, let's revisit some of the old bases that we were doing on a video a while back. We'll put a link to that somewhere up there. And let's see how Dirty Downs can improve what we did then. As you'll remember, I did these videos basically to be like, anybody can do a decorative base. And I think with Dirty Downs on top of what we did then, you get some really cool effects. So let's get back to the table and see what we can cook up. So just real quick, I have modified an older base from a different video, and I've just gone ahead and kind of taken my own whack at doing a very basic rusty effect. I would use something like this to kind of recreate like the surface of Mars, and then I'm just going to be putting the rust effect all over it. I'm going to be focusing that rust effect on any of the larger flat raised areas, just because it'll give it a nice darker tinge, and it'll crack a little bit there and maybe look a bit more like stone. And yeah, we're just gonna go ham-fisted. I'm gonna thin it out a little bit around the more open areas with a little bit of water, and hopefully that will get us a lot of brighter oranges and things like that. So it'll be a nice dark brown around the rocks and a brighter orange on all of the sandy bits. At least that's my plan. And you'll notice in the background of some shots, you'll see the effect actually happening, and it does actually work out how I hoped. And we'll see a shot at the end of them all together. We're going to way back over to this base. This is probably the second most popular base I have ever done for a decorative base idea. Fits real well into the Fallout universe. We're just putting a little bit of rust effect over some of those metal bits. Same thing with this base, single-handedly the best base I've probably made for any of the basing series. You guys really loved this one when I did it. We're just applying it to anywhere that's metal, so along those little I-beams and some of the little bits that are scattered around the display. And once that's had a little bit to dry, I'm coming back in and I'm just applying some of this moss around the outside edges of this water puddle. Under normal circumstances, I would actually be applying this to the entirety of the bottom of the water puddle, darkening it up in the places where I would be applying those water effects to make it look a little bit deeper, but also to make it look as though that moss is growing in the water itself. But since I'm working with an older base and I'm working within those confines, I'm just going to apply it around the outside edge. I'm also going ahead and putting a little bit in and around that wire, and then I kind of clean it up a little bit to keep it nice and thin, just so that it's not overpowering with that bright neon green that it can turn when it's super thin like that. And then we're going to go ahead and apply it pretty much all over everywhere that I was attempting to make look mossy in this original base. And in some places it does look really good, and in others it doesn't. Something to keep in mind with Dirty Downs is that it works its best on a textured surface, and these little bits of paper towel that I was using to kind of simulate sheet metal, they're just a little bit too flat. Yeah, there's some texture there, but it's not great. Where it really shines is in and around all of this dirt texture and everything else that I've built up around the base. So it worked really great in other places. And for this base, I don't think I've ever really shown this one off before. I built this one simply for an example of how I think you can make just gluing rocks to your base look good and interesting. And honestly, once I got all this moss on here, I mean, you can see it changing color in real time, and it looks really great. All I had to do was go back in and pick out some of those rocks and make them look gray again, and it really added a lot of vibrancy and texture. And what it really does is it looks like a forest floor, like a rainforest forest floor. I could see you adding some grassland tufts or any kind of thing like that, or maybe even some of those other plants that GW has put out, or any company has put out, those really tropical vibrant plants, and that base would look absolutely killer. Now let's go ahead and take a look back at where we started. Now, as you can see, Dirty Downs is one of those products where the more you play around with it, the more you can figure out what it does. One of the things I want to leave you with is heating up your miniature. If you think it will survive the heating process, use a hair dryer, something safe, start on a low temp, and that'll get you some of your best results. Again, you can see on my test piece here, it doesn't look that great. This is a pretty flat surface. As we saw when I went and actually started to apply it to all of the bases, where I had a lot of texture, that's where it really started to thrive. And you're going to see here in just a second when I show you those bases again once they're all dry. This stuff looked incredible. And I think I'm actually going to be using a lot of these products in ways they weren't necessarily intended, because I got some pretty cool effects. And once again, guys, please give this video a like if you think it's pretty cool and want to see more stuff like this, and you want to see more of what I can do both with Dirty Downs and with basing, because I'd love to do more videos like this. If you like what I do, consider subscribing or even checking out my Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. The more people that subscribe to my Patreon, the more I'll start uploading over there as well, along with exclusive videos and exclusive live streams if that's what you guys are interested in. In any case, I'm all out of time for this week. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Next week we're going to be doing some D&D miniatures, but in any case, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time, guys.